the program so that we can put it up on our YouTube. So I'm hoping that we can have some really interesting discussion today, and hopefully the program won't be that long and will be interesting, and actually I'm hoping kind of fun. So I have the chat window open. Craig, if you could watch that for me.
Yep, got it.
To see if anybody has any questions or comments as we go along. We're going to also be having questions and answers all throughout during the program. So you can unmute, make comments, ask questions, and that will be pretty obvious as we go along. So otherwise, if you would generally mute until you have a question, that would be helpful. Okay, let me bring up the share screen. Okay, let's see what we got here. Get this situated. Okay. Welcome to Preparing for Disaster, the District SRT Team Leader Playbook. Okay, let me just.
Janet, could you mute your mic? We're getting feedback.
Let me try. I thought it was. Hang on. Let me see if I can get it. Okay.
Hold on just a second. Okay, I thought that might be somebody having some difficulty coming in. Okay, let's begin. But let me try to get this situated going. There we go. There we go. Okay, so this program is designed to by the SRT Incorporated and the Stress Response Team Leadership. My name is John Call, as you all know, and the participants are mental health professionals who have volunteered to be district stress response team leaders and district unit coordinators that are in the geographical location of these individuals. We're talking about Oklahoma County, Tulsa County, Cleveland County, and Region 4. So what's this training all about? Well, basically, it's to share with all of you the information regarding how a district SRT team leader, what they need to do before, during, and after a disaster, and to share those skill sets that these individuals need to possess and demonstrate. And why are the district unit coordinators invited? Well, because in a very specific sense, a significant part of the role of a district SRT team leader is to assist you when you decide that your unit will deploy. And we're going to talk about that in more detail. So we're going to use a scenario concept, and it's going to be a wildfire. Carrie, remember 2012? The wildfire outside of Tulsa? That's the first time that you and I met at that shelter, and then later the Mark. You know, we've been involved in this pandemic, and it's really swamped our minds with these pods. But you know something? That does not mean that the other types of disaster are not going to occur. They are going to occur. We're going to have ice storms, tornadoes, and floods, and wildfires. And that's something that we need to recognize, and we do, and which we need to prepare for. So what's the rules that we're going to be using today for this exercise play? Well, we have a plausible scenario. There's no hidden agenda or any trick questions as we go through this. It's important not to jump ahead in the exercise scenario. In other words, don't focus on what might happen, focus on what's the common operating picture presented during the exercise at that moment to make informed decisions. And this exercise is not meant to judge individual performance, but rather it's an opportunity to learn. So, phase one. And there's going to be different phases. And phase one is now. Phase one is before the disaster. And we're going to talk about situational awareness, preparation, and communication. So this is a one way to understand situational awareness by condition and its impact on mental, physical, and a description. Traditionally, the typical American is in the white condition. In other words, they're oblivious. They're unaware. You know, they're preoccupied with their own lives and their own issues. And as you can see, that can change as circumstances change. I propose that the district SRT team leaders, what they need to possess is at all times, with respect to their role, a yellow situational awareness. That right now they should be thinking of, okay, what are the possible disasters that could occur at this time, this month? Let me give you an example. You know, Magic May. That's when all the that's a significant time for tornadoes. So as we come up to March, April, May, June, that is certainly a time when the district SRT team leaders need to be in that yellow, aware of what might be happening or what could happen in the near future. Okay. Before the disaster occurs, there are some things that we need to do. Now let me just ask you some questions. And this is directed to Both, well, it's directed to the SRT team leaders, but I would also direct it to the unit district coordinators, but I'm focusing on our team leaders. Do you know the name, address, and phone number of the unit coordinator in the district in which you reside? So, for example, those of you who reside or who are assigned to Region 4, do you know Miss Blair's name, her phone number? Those of you who are in Tulsa County, do you know Carrie's name, her address, her phone number? Have you introduced yourself to this individual, either in person or by phone? Have you had discussions with your district unit coordinator about including you in their deployment planning as appropriate? Now, let me just stop there for a moment. I don't know if people fully realize that in many, many cases, the stress response team has been deployed without the district unit coordinator ever deploying their unit. The stress response team is a separate, independent unit of the Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps. And there's been many instances where it's deployed and the no other units have deployed. I'm thinking Karen Fritz, and Ed Melton deployed to a shelter and a multi-agency resource center after the more tornadoes in 2013. Stress response team members deployed to the St. Mary Inglese Episcopal Church in South Oklahoma City after the 2015 tornado. We deployed to various marks in Woodward, and Region 1 unit was not deployed. And vice versa, the unit coordinators, the district unit coordinators have deployed volunteers to various pods in the last few years, and the stress response team is not deployed.
Dr. Call, I was just going to jump in and clarify that I always make sure that the district leadership, the unit coordinator, the director at the health department knows when SRT is deploying in their area. And yeah, just like you're pointing out, there's not always a mission for the MRC unit at the times when SRT is deployed, which is why it's sometimes they don't deploy at the same time, but the communication is there to make sure that the health department and district leaders are aware that the SRT is deploying, that you guys aren't just sneaking in to do your mission, but you are a part of the bigger response picture and everyone's aware of that.
That's right. And that's the way it has to be. Okay. Team leaders. Do you know the names of the other licensed health and mental health professionals or spiritual care specialist faith leaders who have volunteered as SRT team members in your district? I bet you none of you have, except for Craig and I. And why do Craig and I know? Because we have developed a database for every region in the state of Oklahoma of every licensed mental health professional who's a volunteer. And team leaders, you will need to get that information, that portion of the database from Craig Long. because you need to have that available to you. You need to know the names and addresses and contact information, phone numbers, emails of these people, because those are the people that you are going to be responsible for. Have you required or asked for or initiated a meeting with these other SRT volunteers? That is a part of that phase 1 preparation. So what I want you to do is that once you get this database from Craig, I want you to reach out to these other licensed mental health professionals. For example, you people who are district team leaders for Tulsa County or for Region 4, I want you to reach out, or to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma County, to reach out to those people and, send them an email message about your role, make contact with them. And if we could talk further about that, about what you might say, think about developing maybe a situation where you could do a Zoom meeting, perhaps, or as things calm down and people want to get together, ask the district unit leader if they have a room available where you could have a brief meeting with people, just a kind of a get together. Be creative. Now, we have developed a resource manual, and we have put that resource manual into a Dropbox file folder, which we have sent you a link to. And it's also, we're going to be putting these files that are in that Dropbox into that closed Facebook group page. Okay, so let's get back to our scenario. It's Tuesday, 11 a.m. Temperatures are soaring over the past week, rise in winds, and a significant drop in humidity levels. There's burning bans in place throughout the state. Local media reports that fire departments and the Forest Service have responded to and contained several small brush fires in remote areas. According to the National Weather Service, the combination of dry fuels and weather conditions has drastically increased the risk of extreme fire danger, and it issues a fire weather warning. The threat of wildfire has been extended to more densely populated areas, including communities built within proximity to wildfire-prone lands. In 2017, 2018, in Region 1, almost 1 million acres over a 2-year period were burned up. Fortunately, there's more cows out there than people, but still it was a dramatic impact on the community. And we had that in 2012 in that brushy area northwest of Tulsa. As well as, remember, David, that same 2012, there was fires around Lake Thunderbird. Okay, question. I'm going to throw this out to you. Who in the organization, either in the Medical Reserve Corps or the stress response team, is responsible for monitoring, or who would likely hear or receive a bulletin or alert from the National Weather Service or other alerting authority? Question. Anybody got an answer to that? Leslie?
In Cleveland County, it would be our unit leader, which would be David Grizzle.
Okay.
That's a loaded question, John. You talking about health department wise or SRT wise or MRC wise or?
I'm talking both. I'm talking about in the medical reserve corps or the stress response team is responsible for monitoring or would likely hear or receive a bulletin or alert.
Of course,
Or,
loaded.
or any other alerting authority from the weather, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with JS Blair. I apologize that we haven't met, so I don't know what the JS stands for. But I agree with him. Local emergency response quarter on the oh, is that Carrie? JS Blair's Carrie? Oh no,
Donna Sue.
she moved. You undid, and it caused my screen. I'm going, oh, wait a minute.
Which
Okay. Yeah, you know, health department alert, the local MRC coordinator. I mean, it's kind of a gamut here in Oklahoma that if you're in the public safety business, you're in tune to the National Weather Service. I mean, that's just a given. All the above, all the above.
Yeah. Well, first off, you know, with respect to the stress response team, there is no official quote person designated monitoring. That's why I said early on that anybody in a position of responsibility, myself included, but certainly, you know, district team leaders need to always be in the yellow, so that they need to be aware of what is happening. I think that's, yes, go ahead, Levon.
I was just going to say that, you know, some of us are ham radio operators, and I'm always scanning my ham radio anytime we have severe weather and stuff. And a lot of times I hear things 5 minutes before it's even put on like News 9 or anything. So I'm like posting on Facebook, and then my friends on Facebook are like, I follow you more than I follow Channel 9.
Good.
So ham radios are good way to get notifications too.
So the bottom line for us is that, you know, for us in the stress response team who have a leadership position, we just need to take it upon ourselves to always be in that yellow awareness, and kind of like what David said, just be monitoring. It's that's just a part of the role. So you're monitoring, and you know that there's an issue. Now, as a leader, we have to be proactive. So what information are you, and I'm now focusing on the team leaders, what information are you or should you be sharing with your fellow leaders, or I mean your fellow volunteers and leadership at this time? What are the current, you know, for example, remember this is the situation. It's Tuesday at 11 a.m. Temperatures are soaring. There is a extreme fire danger, and there's a fire weather warning and a red flag warning. So, you know, what information, if any, should you be sharing with your volunteers and leadership at this time? And district unit leaders, just chime in there with a suggestion to the team leaders. But I'm focusing on the team leaders right now.
The one you forgot to add was the humidity is sky high and the amount of precipitation is below zero. And then you have a nice little recipe for, as you said a while ago, 2012 all over again. So what you're really trying to do is get the word, for me, word of mouth many different ways to, you know, don't be stupid, don't charcoal, don't burn grass, don't do this, don't do that. You're accentuating that warning message that's being put out by local officials, and make sure, because if we've got, you know, if I put out an email, we've got, you know, well over 600, 700 people on the MRC list for Cleveland County. And I put one email out that says, you know, be cautious because of the conditions, heavy fire danger. Look how much situational awareness that we just raised.
Exactly.
Because a
Yeah,
lot of people don't pay attention to fire warnings.
That's right. Now, remember what I said earlier, team leaders. I said, it is now your responsibility to know the name and contact information of every volunteered licensed mental health professional in your area. So this would be a perfect situation where you might just send out a blast email to those folks, just saying, hey, just want everybody to be aware we're in a potential dangerous situation. Kind of like what Levon just said when she does her Facebook things. Another way you could do it is is that you could there's a couple things. You could invite everybody to join a closed Facebook page that you develop for your region, for your district. You don't have to do that, but that's just, I mean, you could do the blast email. I'm just bringing that up as a possibility. Okay, so what, if any, decisions should be made at this time? Let's focus in on the team leaders. What decisions should be made at this time? What decisions should you make? Craig, what would you make? What would you do at this time?
I would just kind of get the heads up, kind of like what David had said and stuff like that, like situational awareness, but also just, in the event that just kind of not necessarily just kind of gauge whether people are able to help if help is needed.
Mm-hmm. So basically, there's not much to do except to alert yourself and alert your team members. And we've talked about how you could do that. You can do that by a blast email. You could do it by a Facebook closed group page or whatever. Okay. Use some other social media tool that you feel comfortable with, and you've asked all of your people to utilize. I'm not going to actually take you to there because I think all of you know about that particular page that we use. Okay, now it's Wednesday. At approximately 1:37 p.m., a truck traveling on State Highway 270 heading towards Woodville slams into a utility pole after the right front tire blows. Driver loses control. The driver's injuries are minor, but the accident knocks down a utility pole. Sparks from the down utility lines immediately ignite a small fire in the undergrowth. Now, this fire quickly grows much larger, and the concerned citizens who are trying to control that fire call 911. The Johnson Volunteer Fire Department arrives within 12 minutes and begins to work at bringing the wildfire under control. But winds are gusting as high as 16 miles per hour, and the fire is spreading quickly. And this, fire department does not have necessary equipment. As the fire department radios for assistance from the State Forest Service, they decide to pull back from the fire and to consolidate their operations with other local community fire departments who have just arrived on the scene. So the wildfire identified in red over here has consumed about 150 acres. Strong winds are blowing from the west, and it continues the fire continues in an easterly path. And another couple of hours go by before a wildfire suppression team from the state's Forestry Service arrives. And this is the city here, a little city. With winds out of the west, now gusting up to 20 miles per hour, the wildfire suppression team's incident commander believes that the results, believes that the residents of Johnson may be in danger. That's Johnson. He's notified the county's emergency management agency to provide an update on the wildfire, informs the emergency manager that there might be a need to evacuate Johnson. Evacuate Johnson. Okay. Okay. So will the Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps, let's talk about, will the Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps or the stress response team have been contacted by the emergency response officials at this time? Yes or no? Anybody? Leslie.
The unit coordinators, many of whom are in the position of a local emergency response coordinator, they would be aware of the situation. They would be working on other aspects of that in their role as that. However, at this time, there's not a mission for MRC identified. And so volunteers wouldn't have been contacted at this point. But unit coordinators would be aware of the situation, many of them, not all, because of their other job duties.
That's right. That's right. And team leaders, you would not have been contacted because you just by the very thing that Leslie just said. But you, because of your heightened awareness, your yellow situation, you would know that there's a fire going on and that it's moving. And because you have made contact, personal contact with the district leader, in your district, you would have asked them, if at any time you think that something might be coming down the road, please, if you have the time, shoot me an email. So, it's not that doesn't mean that they'll have the time to shoot you an email, but maybe they will. So that's all you can do. Again, what information are you or should you be sharing with your fellow volunteers and leadership? Well, you should be keeping your folks up to date. And besides that, you should be emailing me or calling me to let me know your concerns. Okay, phase 2. Impact. The disaster strikes. So Thursday now, 10 a.m. The County Emergency Management Agency has made the decision that Johnson needs to be evacuated due to the approaching wildfire. The wildfire continues its eastward path of destruction. Local law enforcement and other agencies can be found supporting the evacuation of Johnson, with citizens being directed to shelters in Buffalo and Fort Brown. Now, guys, this is the classic situation where the stress response team is most appropriate to be deployed. Citizens being directed to shelters. And I have been involved in shelter situations where the stress response team was the only Medical Reserve Corps unit deployed. But I've also been in situations where there were other units. For example, I'll give you an example. 2012, this very scenario, little town outside of Tulsa, Cary deployed a physician and nurses, but also the stress response team was deployed. But then there's been other circumstances. For example, I deployed to a shelter outside of, I believe it was Choctaw, where I was the only, the stress response team was the only team, only medical reserve corps team group there.
Dr. Call,
So, yep.
I just want to just point out something that everyone might not be aware of, but in Oklahoma, the Red Cross is the lead organization for setting up shelters in Oklahoma. The health department is not responsible for sheltering.
That's not necessarily a correct statement. Leslie, I don't mean to correct you, but you talk to Mary Jane, over the years, the Red Cross has gone from a sheltering organization to a sheltering support organization. And I fight this all the time. Red Cross now wants you to set the shelter up, and then they come along and run it. So, and that's a very distinct situation, because we got into that during the March 2012 wildfire out there, where the Red Cross would not do that, because there was a lot that, Red Cross standards, minute you turn it, and I fight this all the time in the city, this last 2 snowstorms, minute you turn a key on a door, that building has got to be ADA compliant. There's got to be a certain standard according to the Red Cross, or they won't use the building. But now, that's what caused a lot of it. Now, granted, yes, you're correct in saying that they are the lead element in sheltering, but their philosophy has turned, for the most part, from them doing the whole thing to them supporting the whole thing. And that's a big distinction to understand. Maybe that's be a great training for Mary Jane to come in and give us, make sure everybody's on the same sheet of music. Because I fight this all the time here. People are screaming for shelters, and the Red Cross will call me and say, well, what facility have you got? And I have no facilities. I mean, City of Norman absolutely has little or no facilities for that purpose. I've fought this for 20 years. So good training opportunity there, Dr. Call. Maybe bring her in, give us and now it's even regional. Oklahoma falls under Kansas. If we need Red Cross support, it's coordinated through Kansas. When I call Red Cross for a burnout, they have contracted with OnStar. I'm actually talking to a representative of OnStar, who turns around and calls Kansas, who turns around and calls Oklahoma, who turns around and calls the local person, to turn around and call me to validate the fire or whatever happened. So a lot of, they've gotten rid of all their local chapters. So I would recommend we get a briefing from Mary Jane.
That's interesting.
Agreed.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Well, and I agreed. But again, pointing out that those are conversations, and those are a lot of times things that are taking place at the state level, at the district level. I also wanted to point out and just make people aware, because David works for the City of Norman and their emergency management. So he really brings a different perspective, which is so valuable to us, than many of our unit coordinators who work in the health department, which is in our emergency preparedness and response there, which is the housing organization for the district MRC units primarily. Again, David's been a great partner with the MRC since the beginning, and he brings that unique perspective into that. But my original point was going to be, it's not the MRC that will be setting up a shelter. We may be called in to assist with those elements. But again, we are a support organization and we respond when requested.
Yes.
So it's good to have the situational awareness that Dr. Call has been mentioning, and know how you're going to take care of your family so that you're available to help out others. But yes, the MRC isn't going to be the first call on if we set up a shelter. Because
That's-
those discussions will be taken by others. Okay, back to you, Dr. Call.
Yes, and that's absolutely correct. And stress response team is not a set up shelter a group. Now, interesting thing here, guys, is that it is likely that when a shelter is set up, that the Medical Reserve Corps stress response team will be called. Now, here's the reason why. People don't understand this, but let me just be very specific. The Red Cross has a role called disaster mental health specialist. And you have to be a licensed healthcare professional to have this role. And you have to undergo Red Cross training and go through their background check. But people don't realize that that the mental health professionals who have this role are specifically told not to provide mental health services to survivors in shelters. Get that, underline that. The Red Cross has made a policy decision that they do not provide behavioral health, mental health services. They will provide referral. Then you can ask, well, why are there mental health professionals that might be there? Well, they might be there. Well, they are there to help provide behavioral health support to Red Cross volunteers. Finally, there are in the state of Oklahoma, very, very few nominated individuals who fit that role. I personally in 10 years have only seen in extended deployments like the Moore tornado, mental health disaster specialists coming in from out of state with after several days with the Red Cross. And I have in every other major situation where there has been a shelter set up, I get calls from Red Cross representatives asking for deployment of the stress response team, and I refer them to Leslie to fill out an appropriate form. So it's the same way with the Multi-Agency Resource Center, which I'm going to be talking about in a minute. But in our scenario, we're having some shelters or 2 shelters being set up. And yes, you know, you're not going to be called automatically, but you, with your situational awareness, knowing when you hear that a town's being evacuated, you automatically have to understand, well, they're going to be evacuated to some place. There's going to be a shelter, you know. So knowing that, what, if any, decision should you make at this time? What should you, you guys got an idea, Gail?
Well, I want to interject something that when I responded on the 2013 tornado, I was at the MRC. I was at the MARC, and I got told 2 or 3 times by the Red Cross to stop doing mental health treatment. And I wasn't, in my opinion, doing treatment, but I was helping, one instance, I was helping a family to calm themselves because they were so stressed out. And so based on what you said, that makes sense. But this person didn't take into consideration the fact that I'm actually licensed in the state of Oklahoma and trained as the MRC. Now, or is it, part of the MRC.
Yeah, let me just jump in there. What happened, and I've seen this, is that they think you're a Red Cross volunteer. And that's what they don't see, that you are a Medical Reserve Corps unit volunteer who has been asked to assist. And we have different rules.
Right.
You know, our rules are determined by the Medical Reserve Corps, not by the Red Cross. So if they ask us there, and what I would tell you would be, you know, in that situation, if would be to let me know, but as a team leader, you now know is that you would turn to that person and say, well, and you would make that distinction. Well, we're not Red Cross volunteers. We're Medical Reserve Corps volunteers. We act under different rules.
And and since you mentioned that they're not, they're told not to do mental health treatment or counseling or whatever in this when they're deployed, that makes a lot of stuff make sense to me that I wasn't aware of at the time. I thought it was kind of strange to have mental health providers from other states come in when they're not likely to be licensed in this state.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, John,
Go ahead.
a key little thing about establishing a mark, you have to have an owning jurisdiction. Someone has to be responsible for all that. Our mark in 2012, it was the city of Norman that was the responsible entity. So if you bring in, and we had about 30 organizations in a church building out on McGuire Road, if you have conflict between organizations, find out who's the owner, who's the responsible entity for deconfliction.
Gotcha.
You know, so just some info there.
Yeah. And for team leaders, it's not your job to deconflict. And when you run up against deconflict, you know, an issue like that, you're to run it up to me, and then I'll kick it up to Leslie. That's why Leslie gets paid the big bucks. Okay. Okay, so let's move on. Phase 2. Now I'm going to briefly go over this. We're going to kind of go this kind of quickly, but this is something that you kind of need to know. And this is phase 2. Agencies active in disaster. The list of players and what they do, because you're as a team leader and you're working, you know, you're kind of like supervising different teams out there. You're going to be, and basically we're working, you know, somebody asks us, we don't show up. Somebody asks us to help them out. And let's take a look at this, who the players are. Okay. First off, the declaration sequence, and I'm talking about the state of emergency. The governor declares a state of emergency, and he makes the request for presidential declaration, and they make it for public assistance and or individual assistance and or hazard mitigation. The request is reviewed by FEMA regional office, which is for us is in Denton, Texas. Then it goes, if they like it, it sends it to headquarters in Washington. They review it, they make recommendations and sends it to the president, and he makes a disaster declaration or not. Now, is this really relevant to us? Not from a practical sense. I just want you guys to know it. Okay. Now, you see, but let's talk about the disaster recovery process. Everything begins at the local level. And so whenever there's a disaster, it's undeclared at the beginning. Okay. And it may be declared as a disaster or not, depending upon the circumstances. Now, here's another piece of information, which general population doesn't understand or doesn't realize. When you ask somebody what percentage, and let me just kind of bring this up to you, what percentage of all goods and services in the immediate aftermath of a disaster are provided by local, state, or federal government? Think of a number. I bet you guys didn't know that it's only 17%. That in point of fact, 80% of all goods and services that are provided to survivors in the immediate aftermath of disaster does not come from local, state, or federal government. It comes from organizations, voluntary organizations active in disaster. That's the VOAD. Okay. So let's take a look at this VOAD thing. Now, some of you know about VOAD, some of you don't. Basically, there are 53 national organizations in the national VOAD, and then there's a state VOAD. And the state VOAD is made up of a whole bunch. Let's take a look at Oklahoma. See, that you got the American Red Cross, you got Catholic Charities, Church of the World. So most members of the VOAD in our state and across the United States are faith-based organizations. Now, except for, come down here, look at this. SRT Incorporated is a voting member of the Oklahoma VOAD. Okay. Now, the VOAD meets every other month, alternately in Oklahoma City or Tulsa. Since the pandemic, they've been meeting virtually. And I think that anybody who would like to participate or just to observe the VOAD meetings should let me know, and I'll set it up for you. Okay, we've been at it for about an hour. Let's take a 5-minute break. Okay.
Hey, John, before you do that, you made a comment a while ago about the declaration process, and it doesn't really matter or mean too much for this situation. Just for your knowledge, as a 501c3 means a lot, means you're eligible for reimbursement for certain things, providing support to the requesting jurisdiction. And you have to be able to show that you were requested by that jurisdiction. And then the hours, the volunteer hours that you put in as your organization is attributable to that organization to meet their cost share. So your participation as a 501c3 in the MRC it means a lot.
Well, you're absolutely right. Yes, go ahead. Explain more.
Our ham radio club, I can't remember what year it was, running in the EOC and was transmitting messages, and we were doing this, that, the other thing, and had documented their hours and their equipment, and they received a check from FEMA for their participation.
Ah,
That's where I was getting. If you do it right, there's a possibility for the organization to receive reimbursement. Your time's not reimbursable, but certain things are. Okay.
okay.
And
Well, that's I don't think I actually knew that. Thanks for bringing that up.
And I had another point that you said something I can't remember, but I'll eventually remember it. I'm over 60 now, so I have those moments. So
Okay.
So
Okay.
coffee break time, I guess.
Yeah. So let's come back at 5 after the hour. Thank you, everybody. Anybody hanging around?
I'm a little slow today because I'm like, I had my knee surgery yesterday. So I'm just like on crutches, just trying to get across the house. It's horrible. But
Well, what kind of surgery was it?
it's a meniscus repair.
Oh, okay.
So they said I should only be off work for like a week and stuff. So, but yeah, hobbling on crutches is not my favorite activity.
So, you do a lot of, tell me, are you familiar with WinLink or anything or like?
Yeah, I've gone through some training on it and stuff. I went to an Aries meeting with, down in Norman and stuff a couple months ago and stuff. And I mean, it's okay. It just seems kind of confusing to me, but I'm technologically challenged anyway. So
Yeah, I've spent since Christmas a heck of a lot of money on new radio equipment, and really been spending a lot of time on YouTube because that's watching ham radio crash course. Some of these guys YouTube streams, some of them,
oh yeah.
some of them are pretty good actually. And also, I'm thinking about going down tomorrow at 9 o'clock to Norman. A WinLink specialist is supposed to be making
Oh,
a
really?
presentation. Yeah, at 9:30 at the fire station. So I was
Probably
thinking
the
about,
same guy that I saw back in October or whenever it was. I'm trying to see if I can find my paperwork that I had from back then.
so I don't know. I've been thinking about developing this idea of a communication team leader for the stress response team. And it would be a different than your typical if I understand Aries right, what the Aries is that if you're a member of Aries, then some outfit, some other organization asks you to just transmit their messages and receive messages for them during a disaster.
Sorta, yeah. It's my understanding that Aries is under the ARRL, and that they do a lot of radio work and stuff during emergencies and disasters and stuff. But I don't know all the down and dirty
Yeah.
what they do and what they don't do and stuff. So
Okay. So anyway, I was thinking about a little bit of a different thing where I like, for example, let's say there's somebody in region 1 who is an Aries. Well, anybody, let me just stop right there because it's after 5 after. Anybody else here?
Hey, John, are you displaying slides or are you just referring to them?
Oh, I'm just talking to Levon about stuff right now.
No, I know that, but I mean, I see you looking like when you're talking, you look like you're referencing slides. I just didn't know if your intent was to display your slides or are you just using that for reference?
Oh, no, I'm supposed to be, there's supposed to be slide. Are you not seeing slides?
No slides.
No,
Damn.
I sent you a message about that too.
Yeah, I did too.
Oh, damn.
I was trying to see. I'm like, maybe he had me have access, so I was gonna try and
Oh,
put the slides
geez.
up and follow along with the slides, like help.
Well, what
help
in
you
the
along,
heck?
but
Okay, I'm gonna,
I was trying to help, but you wouldn't let me,
ah,
and it wouldn't
okay.
let me copy and paste the slides in. So
Okay, I'm gonna try to bring it up again.
And on the radio stuff, are you coming to the meeting Saturday?
Yeah, I'm thinking, yep, I think so.
Well, Mark Klein is the Aries regional coordinator and he'll be there. So you can visit with him and.
yeah, he's real good. He's the one I've been talking, or I've talked to a few times too. The biggest thing about Aries though is since they fall under ARRL, you have to be a member of ARRL to be a member of Aries. So it's kind of, I don't know, one of those things. Sorry. And to be a member of ARL, you have to pay like $45 or $49 or something like that per year. So.
Are you seeing a slide now?
No.
Are you seeing a slide
No.
now?
Yes.
There it is.
Huh.
Aha.
Okay, did the slide change?
Yes.
Okay. Well, when there's another screw up, just interrupt verbally.
Okay.
Darn. Well, okay. Well, okay, it's 10 after. We're going to start. Okay, phase 3. Activation. Question. How are you activated as a member of the stress response team? Leslie, are you on?
Yes.
Okay. So you jump right in. Tell people how a unit is activated.
Okay. For health districts, with the unit's official activation, again, we as an organization need to be requested. We of course don't want to self-deploy or confuse the response in other ways. And so after we're requested, the unit coordinator gets the information we need about that response. And the district health director approves the response. And that is what makes the response official. Now for SRT, when they take in a request and they'll communicate with me again to make sure everyone's on the same page in the response before they'll deploy as well. Now, as far as when the volunteer finds out, the official form of communication for OKMRC is an email from the OKMRC website. Of course, a volunteer could go to the website directly and see if there is an event posted where they can sign up to deploy. The volunteer signs up there, the unit coordinator approves it, and then that's when they get the final information to deploy. These steps, it seems like a lot, I know sometimes, but it's all very important for the OKMRC to be working within the system for, the incident command system is what we're typically stepping into and supporting in the roles there. And so this makes sure that we are working in a chain of command, that all of the appropriate people know, who to report to, when we're activated and all of that. So we're staying in our lane as a responding agency or organization so that we're not duplicating efforts or risking anyone's safety, and also confusing anything on the common operating picture. And these are all things that are very important with ICS, which is why we have all of the volunteers complete those trainings. Probably a longer answer than you were looking for.
So anyway, as a team leader, basically, you're not going to be responsible for that. What will happen is that Leslie and I, or Tom Thompson, will be, well, Leslie, we'll be involved in that aspect, and we will be setting up the volunteer application process or deployment process, where they come to the website and request or indicate that they want to deploy. So you don't have to worry about that, but you're going to be like you'll be in informal communication with people who will potentially be volunteering or who have volunteering. So we will be Tom will be communicating with you about, okay, we are going to be deploying in Region 4. We're going to be deploying in Oklahoma County. And we'll be setting up the system for people to indicate that they want to deploy and the times. And then you, as team leader, can communicate through your informal network that you would have developed with people, saying, letting them know, and then finding out, and then urging them to actually deploy. Let me talk to you about a problem that we had. In 2012, there was a blast email sent out, and we really needed people, but there was myself, Ed Melton from northeast Oklahoma, and Karen Fritz, who showed to the shelters and the marks that we needed them. And it wasn't until I had some conversations about the lack of volunteers that Lauren Stein and a woman who no longer is associated with the Medical Reserve Corps in a leadership position started making phone calls. And everybody they phoned volunteered. So that's one of the things I found, is that personal touch, that personal relationship can be very crucial. So a couple of other points to be made. Volunteers must be used according to their training and capabilities. So what is the purpose of the stress response team? It's to provide psychological first aid and stress first aid and skills for psychological recovery to people, for example, in our scenario, at the shelter. Should you be burning trash? No, that's not your, should you be, filling gasoline tanks for the fire trucks? No, that's not your job. Obviously, self-deployment or being contacted by individual members from outside agencies are prohibited. There is a code of conduct. Volunteers are expected to conduct themselves in a professional and appropriate manner at all times. Now, here's something which a little pop quiz, but it's not really a pop quiz. Let's just go through it about confidentiality, because in a major, I got to tell you, in 1995, I had to deal with Connie Chung at the Murrah bombing, and some of my friends, one of my colleagues had to deal with Geraldo Rivera, which I'm glad I didn't have to work with or deal with him. Wasn't work with him, he was still avoiding. So basically, what can you tell people outside of the stress response team about what you've seen and what you've experienced? So here's some do's. It is appropriate to share disaster and mark statistics, to tell that you're a part of a team, to thank others publicly for their support. General statements about the conditions on the ground. It's crowded, it's hurried, it's stable, whatever. General statements about the impact. Discussions about how it affected you, if you want to say that. Don'ts. You don't want to share names or any identifying fact. You don't share specific individual stories. You don't ask survivors if you can tell their stories. You don't take photos without specific permission from the team coordinator, which is, which is you, and you would get your permission from me. Don't offer media interviews. Don't offer press statements without authorization. Don't say anything you wouldn't say in front of a survivor. So some do's and don'ts. Some general considerations. Unit coordinators and team leaders should carefully assess all volunteers to ensure their ability to fulfill the intended mission. So there's a fitness for duty guidelines. That's one of the first things I did when I graduated from my internship. They sent me up to the 4th Air Division in a Strategic Air Command. They said, John, you're not here to do treatment. That's why we got the Veterans Administration. You're here to do fitness for duty evaluations on officers and men, and you're here to work with the Office of Special Investigation in looking at issues of crime and so on and so forth. I did my first behavioral analysis profile of a serial rapist in 1976. This is like years and years and years before the Silence of the Lambs, or before people talked about forensic psychology. So volunteers are asked to evaluate their fitness levels in the following categories. They should be physically fit, emotionally fit, and financially and work fit to be deployed. So we've developed a pre-deployment questionnaire and a post-deployment questionnaire. I just want to briefly mention this. And I want to mention this as well to the district unit coordinators. I was asked to develop these in 2012. Sandy Wiggins is very interested in the application or use of such techniques. There always has been some resistance, I think, for two reasons. One is that it's not fully understood how they can be used and how helpful they are. And number two, people are concerned that they don't have the time to see that they're administered or to be utilized. Well, let me just state that both the pre-deployment and the post-deployment questionnaire have been designed to be self-administered and to be interpreted by the individual volunteer. For you unit district coordinators, it's not that. What I would say to you is that let's say that this is a perfect opportunity to ask to utilize the stress response team. We can train, I can train these district team leaders on how to interpret these tools. All you have to do is to ask when you send out an email to a volunteer, is to ask them to self-administer these tools through SurveyMonkey, utilizing SurveyMonkey that stress response team pays over $1,000 a year to provide. And as district team leaders can interpret that information and provide you with a written summary or a verbal summary. That could aid and assist you at really no extra cost or significant amount of time. Just heads up on that. So here is the team structure. We have the district team leader. We have, this isn't a perfect situation, okay? You got the district team leader, there's a team leader, and then team members. How many times though, I'm the unit coordinator, I'm the district team leader, I am the team leader, and I'm the team member, and that's who showed up. So, I mean, that's happened, okay? I'm everybody. And it could happen to you that you are the team leader, the district team leader, and the team member, you know, that could happen. But, you know, in a perfect situation, and, you know, and sometimes I guess that would be appropriate in a small situation, you know, but if you have a more tornado situation, I could see where we would have something like this. Okay. We got the coordinator. We got the district team leader, you know, and then there's a team leader and then team members. Okay. Well, where does the district unit coordinator, you know, somebody like Julia or Carrie or Johanna, or is it Jonna? Well, they're over here. But as a district team leader, you see this dash line? If they're deploying, they're your client as well, if they want your services. So it is possible that because one of the reasons for the existence of the stress response team is to assist other volunteers. Well, by how? Well, by providing them psychological first aid or stress first aid as necessary. Well, how would you assist the district unit coordinator? By providing them the interpretation of by providing them the interpretation of the pre-deployment questionnaire. And by being responsible to review the post-deployment questionnaire for them. So team member and risk management policies, you know, basically it's very simple. With respect to scope of practice, all members should follow state laws, rules, and protocols. Members of the stress response team should not attempt any intervention that they're not authorized or trained to do. And all of you have heard my crazy story about those people who showed up after the Moore tornado from another state giving out injections because it was a disaster, even though they weren't licensed in the state of Oklahoma. So, do all professional ethical rules apply to mental health professionals during the chaos and confusion characteristic of the impact or heroic phase of a disaster? Well, the answer is yes. Of course. So, phase 4. That's deployment. You know, the disaster team leaders and the members are contacted. They sign up. As Leslie talked about, they deploy. What is it that you do? You are overseeing that. And you also might be, you know, like I said before, you might be also the team leader and the team member. So how does the our MRC notify contact, you know, the team leaders and members? Well, hey, Leslie said, if there's a blast email, and that's the formal way. And then they go to the okmrc.org calendar and they sign up. But you are responsible for the informal communication. That informal communication pushes, that personal contact will push people from your district into the system. And we're not having a break. We're moving on. Phase 5. Getting near the end, guys. Deployment, duties, and documentation. So team members will be only deployed as per established OKMRC guidelines, and we're talked about that. Now, sometimes team members may or may not be deployed as a part of a general medical team. There's only been twice in 15 years, well, since 2006, where I've deployed as a part of a general medical team. One was the 2007 situation where they bust up a bunch of people from Louisiana to a big cavernous building in Oklahoma City, and they had a doctor on call. They had nurses and paramedics and a pharmacist sometimes. And so but I got to tell you, and then in 2012, over there where Kerry's son had deployed, there was a medical doctor there sometimes. But those are the only times that I have seen a kind of like a really general medical team. But potentially we can have the multidisciplinary task force. Now, when a situation where you have a team leader and team members that are stress response team folks, that's called a strike force because they're all one profession. But it is possible that you might be working with a group of folks who are, well, you might have a nurse or a paramedic and a licensed behavioral health professional and a faith leader. You know, we have more. In 2018, I went out to spend a year going back and forth to Region 1, which is out in the Panhandle. And I found that training faith leaders to be stress response team members was more beneficial than not. Why? The citizens out there had more faith in their faith leaders than in mental health professionals. And B, there were more faith leaders who were willing to volunteer than there were mental health professionals. So if you are part of a medical team, you would report to the medical team leader. If you're not, you always report to the site manager. And that site manager is not going, we never own a site. Isn't that right, Leslie? We never own a site. It's always somebody else's site.
Correct.
Okay. So when we show up, you know, we're being invited and you would report to them. The team leader should, and you should. The team leader would report to you. If there is a team leader, you report to me. Okay. That's all pretty. Then everybody's got documentation to do. Now, in the appendices of the resource manual, and I've rewritten it, there is this critical incident notebook, and it's made up of a personnel roster, shift log, critical incident fact sheet, and after action report. And I've taught y'all this, and probably most of you have seen it already. We've talked about using the internet to communicate, and we don't need to review that. So here we are, back to our scenario. Friday at 12 noon, the stress response team has been activated and is being deployed to shelters that have been set up in Buffalo and support Fort Supply. An SRT team is deploying to the shelter in Fort Brown. I forgot to change Fort Supply to Fort Brown. What should a volunteer do before they leave home? What should they have in their possession as they go out their front door? And I think you guys already know that. What are the things you do and actions you take within the first hour of your people's arrival at the shelter? And we've talked about that before. Phase 5. Well, let's go back to this last, let's see here. What problems or issues or comments do you foresee that you might experience as a district team leader during deployment? Craig, Levon, anybody?
I would be worried that I wouldn't my role as a district team leader wouldn't be taken seriously. They'll be saying, I don't know who you are. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to go do this or do my own thing.
Okay. And that person being a stress response team member, or who would that are you talking about? That would,
Yeah. Just
Oh.
a stress response team member.
okay. The, how would you handle that?
Well, if you're there, I would say, well, let's go talk to Dr. Call for a minute and get this straightened out.
And if I wasn't there, what would you do?
I don't know.
Well,
That's the question.
okay. I think that was anybody have any suggestions before I jump in? Debbie Johnson, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Everybody, this is Debbie Johnson, one of the few PhD social workers you'll ever run across, I got to tell you. And she's also a member of the Board of Examiners. I don't know what you call it for social work, but we call it the Board of Examiners of. Okay. You got any thoughts about that? What she's talking about?
Yeah, about what Levon might do.
Yeah.
I guess I would hope that they would understand that chain of command, and they should. So I think that maybe it would be a situation where you could start to ask them, what are you thinking you should be doing versus what I think you should be doing. So I'm guessing, I guess that's where I would go. I would try to get some clarification on what they think their role is versus what you think their role is. And yeah, there might be a place where you would need to, if it was real extreme, but my hope would be just through communication between the two of you, you could resolve it.
Also, one of the things that it depends on where you come in, Levon. I would think that at the very beginning, you would see who has signed up for the first shift. Okay. And you would know who because if you've done your homework, you have sent out a email and tried to make some contact way before this disaster with all licensed mental health professionals for you, it'd be Oklahoma County, who are members of the OKMRC. So you would have sent out an email or two, and maybe even attempted to have a Zoom conference with them before this wildfire had even happened, so that the word would have spread ahead of time who you are, what your responsibility is. That's why phase one, I talked about how you go out there and learn and introduce yourself to the licensed mental health professionals in your district. Gail, Cleveland County. So there's always people, I gotta tell you, there are always people, there's a bell-shaped curve of humanity on any issue. With some idiots always there on that left-hand side, okay? So, you try to have a conversation. Well, let's back up. So you would go, if you hopefully you have the ability to show up for that first shift, and as you know, any leader does a initial briefing. And that's, you would bring the people together and you'd brief them. And we've talked about that in our team leader training.
Dr.
And if
Paul,
you, yes,
would there not be a situation where somebody from outside of our district would volunteer?
yes,
So they wouldn't know who we are.
that's true. But at the same time, yes, that's true. Let me think.
And if they're not used to having this team concept set up, like in 2013, we didn't have that. And
Right.
so if they're responding, then they think that they're responding through the Oklahoma State MRC, and that's all they need to know. It seems to me that part of the communication from you and from Leslie would be that the district team leader's name is, and make sure you check in with that person to see what support is needed.
That is correct. Now, things have changed from 2013
Yeah.
because of the confusion that occurred. That's when we got a grant from AmeriCares and developed a team leader training, which I know that Levon has attended and Craig has attended. Whenever we did psychological first aid training, we also talked about the team leader concept and stuff like that. Since the pandemic, though, the trainings have significantly decreased. We've done them, but they've significantly decreased. So I think that the way you would do that, Gail's statement is correct and helpful, that when we set up the application process to be a volunteer for this shift, that it's talked about who the team leader is. And lastly, is that the idea that, and this has happened before, you call me, because I am, when you deploy, when there's an issue, when there's a deployment in Region 1, Region 4, Tulsa, and I am in the process. I am in the system too, okay? And you're acting as an extender in the sense that you are in my place. So that when push comes to shove and and things are not going, where you need some backup, you call me, you email me, and then we together will solve the problem one way or another. So there we go. There we go. Any other issues, questions about, or comments about, that's a very good issue, Levon, that you brought up. Anything else that you?
I just wanted to speak up to Levon's concerns. This is the first training in this new concept to provide. And so I think with some education and, SRT volunteers will be hearing more about the SRT leader position. They've received blast emails too on that. It'll be a more common, people will be more aware of the SRT district leader role. And so hopefully, as this becomes a more, with a little bit of time, you hopefully won't run into that, particularly from SRT volunteers, as they run into that. But then always staying in your chain of command, the SRT leader working under the district coordinator, and the district coordinator will know the people to work with. So a lot of times, when someone might step out of that kind of chain of command, the other people aren't aware of what's going on with SRT, with MRC. But again, the people in that chain of command should know what's who's who and who's working under who. So
Yeah.
Again, I think more education will help that issue for all people. And this is the first day to get that started.
Yeah. I got to tell you, in one of the biggest problems in working in disasters is not the disaster, but the people that you work with. And not, I mean, and it's not so much, I'm not so much concerned about the other volunteers. I mean, other stress response team volunteers, but it's the other organizations, if you're at a MARC, what is a MARC? A MARC is a multi-agency resource center, and it's where people come after the disaster to get services. Well, there could be 12, 20 different organizations offering services. Everybody from the Buddhist group to the Mennonites who are offering help rebuilding homes, to the Red Cross, to the a whole slew of different Catholic charities. And you're walking around with the Medical Reserve Corps t-shirt or whatever. Who are you? What do you do? So it's, one just has to utilize their thick skin and charm, and be able to weave in and out of this chaos, and then have places where you can get back up. And I'm a person you can get back up from if another unit of the Medical Reserve Corps is deployed. And who might that be? Well, for example, it would be, in Oklahoma County, Levon, it would be Julia's unit that might be deployed. But likewise, I got to tell you, I've been deployed in a situation where there was a district unit had some nurses and paralegals deployed, but then also the veterinarian unit that looks after animals. So there could be 3 different units, and you can always certainly go and talk about issues, let's say with Julia, if she was around or she was deployed. Okay, good, great. Team demobilization. Basically, upon demobilization, supposedly every volunteer will complete their activity log. I've never seen that done. It's a rule, but I've never seen it done. Obtain all signatures required by the incident action plan. Check in any equipment. Attend a team debrief. Now, I would want you to offer a post-deployment questionnaire to the team members. That's done through a survey, and you would let them know that they'll be receiving an email with a link to do a post-deployment questionnaire. It might be that if a unit district coordinator had deployed, that he or she might want you to offer that to their volunteers, and you would do that. And I will teach you team leaders in more detail about the specifics of the pre and post deployment questionnaire at a later date. And what I'm going to do after this, and you'll look for it, is that I'm going to send you a link so that you can actually take both of them, so that you can begin to see what I'm talking about on what, and then I'll send you a memo that'll describe the process after you take it, just so you see what those questionnaires are all about. But okay. Okay. Demobilization plan. Report any incident related medical issues. That's why we have that critical incident form in the appendices of the resource manual. Check out. You would check out when you leave the site with whoever you check in and check out. If you are There should always be one. If you are at a site, let's say at a site like and you're the only volunteer, you're the only Medical Reserve Corps unit there, you should always designate one person as a check-in and check-out person. And before you leave, besides checking out with that person, you should check out with the site manager or the site manager's designee who does the check-in and check-out. If there is a district unit coordinator has deployed their unit, find out who that unit's team leader is and let them know you're leaving as well. We've talked about the post-deployment questionnaire. Now, after action report, basically after it's in the appendices of the resource manual, take a look at it. So after a deployment, this is where you can gripe and tell me how everything got effed up. Okay. And tell me how to make things better. Okay, mini grant application. You come to the Grants Cafe and you ask for money. Now, here's the deal. I'm going to develop a very simple application form. And this will be put into the Dropbox file. And it'll be also attached to the file in the Facebook group page. So basically, who are you? What's your name? What's your address? What's your phone number? You know, what's your email? Then describe and provide a timeline of how the money will be used. We're talking $500 for the first grant, and then provide a budget. Now, it could be, what can you use this for? You can use it for anything at all except food that has anything to do with your role as a district SRT team leader. So, and you have the ability to pool the money if you want to. So, for example, there are presently 3 people assigned there's 3 people assigned to the Cleveland County, 3 people assigned to Tulsa County, 3 people assigned to Oklahoma County, and then 3 people assigned to Region 4. Potential $1,500. You don't have to pool if you don't want to. You can use it to. I've been thinking about this. To pay for travel expenses to go during deployment or training or whatever. You could use it for, I don't know, equipment. You wanted to buy a couple of Motorola general service mobile radios, walkie-talkie type things.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
To clarify, are you saying that's an individual grant since you described it that way?
Exactly. I'm going to cut $6,000 worth of money at $500 a whack to each one of 12 people.
Well,
so
that's good. Thank you.
And so it's like, Gail, Debbie, you're going to get $500. Levon, Craig, you get $500. But you got to fill out this little form. You got to just, describe to me what you're going to spend it on and kind of a little timeline. You got to have a little budget, and then at the project completion, you're going to have to write a little report about how the money was actually used. Okay. And so, for example, so let me just stop right there. Questions or comments? None? Okay. You look like you got one, Debbie.
I was gonna ask, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask if you've done some brainstorming on what you think might be useful for us out here and what things you're thinking.
Well, I think, for example, I know, for example, Debbie, you live in Owasso. You've been assigned to Miss Blair. Well, it could be a situation. Now, Ed Melton's out there too, and then there's another person. And Ed, it might be a situation where it would be interesting for you guys just to meet with Miss Blair. Now that could be done virtually, and so if you, I don't know where she's located, but that might be you could charge a standard travel fee rate for that. Or let's say there was,
Debbie.
So then there's let's say you were deployed and you were deployed someplace. I remember, for example, Ed came down to Oklahoma City area during the 2013. The poor guy slept in the back of his car. I didn't know that at the time. I later on I gave him some money. But for example, for deployment, if you were deployed and you needed a motel room and travel expense, gasoline, you could use it for that. You could have a backup plan. You could say, well, I'm going to use it. Yeah, I'm going to use it for deployment. But let's say you're not deployed. And I'm thinking that this grant would go for like 6 months. Okay. And depending upon the circumstances, there might be another round. I got money, guys, that I want to spend. I've said it, so we might have another round halfway through with another 6,000 total. So it could be that you might set aside and say, I'm going to use it for deployment, but then you're not deployed. Then you might say, well, I'm going to use it. If I don't deploy it, then I'm going to buy a cheap Android tablet, which I would use to communicate, and keep track of stuff. It's anything that you can tie to your role as a SRT team leader, as long as it's not buying Scotch whiskey or a hamburger.
So John, to clarify, if we put together a budget and then, like I said, we don't end up deploying, we can switch gears as well.
Yeah, you can say that. You can say, well, I will the first deal is to do for deployment, but if I'm not deployed, I want to buy a Android tablet and this. Okay. That's it. And then at the brief report would be, I didn't deploy and I bought an Android tablet and it cost this amount of money.
And I was just going to ask if, for those of us who have never had to write grants report before and stuff, will you be giving us any kind of training when you get this all set up and ready to go? Or
well, what I'll do is that there'll be a form, okay, and the form will have, it'll be explanatory. And for example, in the description and timeline, the form will say no more than 1,200 characters, so you can't just go on and on and on.
I'm good at that.
And if I have questions, I'll just call you up or email you and say, well, what about this? So it'll be really simple. It's
Okay.
really simple.
Simple is good.
Yeah. Okay. So it's time for you to take charge. This little girl here, she's already had the training. And she's got her little backpack there. It's a little teddy bear backpack, and she's going to take charge. This is her district right here. So your next steps are to get ready. And any questions?
How are we supposed to get access to the database to get a hold of all of our people in our region?
Craig Long will be responsible for that.
Yeah, if you want to email me, I can send you your area. So
Well, we'll probably, I mean, we have an what's called an Airtable. I'm wondering, probably what we could do, Craig, we'll talk about this, is like download different areas to a Excel database.
yeah, that was my thinking, is I would just kind of download it into an Excel or like a CSV type format.
Yeah.
And what is your email address?
It's Craig Long at OKSRT. Here, I'll put it in the chat here.
Hey, Craig, where do you live?
I'm in Norman. I'm still here. I get the pleasure of living across from Stoops Castle. So I gotta have all that fun stuff. But I actually was wanted to try and see if I can get together like with you and Gail and stuff like that and kind of have a chat. I've also been talking to Mike too, so just trying to get us Normanites plugged in.
Are you going to be at the SCARS meeting Saturday?
No, I have another meeting in Oklahoma City at 11.
Okay.
Okay, guys. I really appreciate it's too bad that you only got to see half the slides. But what I'll do is I don't know what I'll do. At the very least, I'll figure out something and maybe just do another presentation on my own and put it up on YouTube. I'll also maybe put the slides out into the Dropbox and so that you can have it on your own. As we go along and you have any questions, feel free to contact me. By the way, Craig is my right-hand man on this. So feel free to bug him too.
Yeah.
Debbie, thank you. Gail, Levon, whoever else is still here. Thank you. So you take care of yourself. That's it for today.
Thank you, Dr. Call.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Call. I learned a lot today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Blair. Miss Blair.
It's Jonas Dew. One of them old Southern names.